on the Talkback Show, on the radio, or whatever audiovisual device you choose to use. Welcome to the GBC podcast, where we talk about the Packers and our hometown of Green Bay. This is episode 38, created on January 18th, 2023. I'm John. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Along with me, Jeff in Minnesota and Neil on the East Coast. Say hello, gentlemen, and tell us what you're drinking.
Hello, gentlemen. Tonight we're going with the Deschutes Brewery, The Abyss Barrel Aged.
I am having an Untitled Art Juicy IPA. Untitled Art is a brewery that is from Waunakee, Wisconsin. So hello to my friends in Lodi for this hazy IPA.
All right, and Waunakee just north of Madison. And I have Jeffrey an extra creamy Gin Alexander. All right, you can find us on YouTube and Twitter at Green Bay Chat and Facebook at the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat. And our audio is available on Spotify. Just search for Green Bay Chat. What are we looking at tonight? Well, we've got a wild card round to review, and of course, our Packer player of the past. We'll take a look at this weekend's upcoming divisional round. Our history report brings us back to the 1950s era Green Bay Packers, and then we'll wrap up things after that. But not much Packer news to talk about this week. So, of course, we are talking about the playoffs. Jeff, if you want to throw your soundbite in there, go for it. Yeah, it was the wild card round. And if you remember last week, we each made our picks. Neil and Jeff were both a resounding 4 out of 6 correct. I failed a little bit, ended up 3 and 6. All three of us got the Jacksonville game wrong, and we got the Minnesota Vikings game wrong. But the one that we split on, I had taken the lucky Tom Brady to get through these playoffs, but Tom just did not look like Tom of old. And the Dallas Cowboys took the victory 31-14. And as the saying goes, it wasn't even that close.
Fuck Tom Brady. Fuck Tom Brady. Oh man, was that a glorious game? And I say this as somebody who obviously does not like the Cowboys, but seeing Tom Brady just completely flounder was really one of the highlights of this season, as far as I'm concerned. He looked bad early. He looked bad often. He kept throwing and throwing and throwing. The game was out of control. He still kept throwing and throwing and throwing. The most interesting statistic about Brady from that game, he threw 66 passing attempts, setting a career high for passing attempts in the game, and showing how Tom Brady was just about being Tom Brady and nothing else. They only had 12 rushing attempts in that game. 4.3 yards per attempt rushing for the Buccaneers. That wasn't good enough for Tom Brady. He's going to keep chucking it and hope that he can do something on his own. It was glorious. It was, there's certainly plenty of schadenfreude as far as the Cowboys kicker missing 4 extra points. The Cowboys globally look good, although the game started out with 3 and out. So there's, plenty of schadenfreude to go around if you're a non-fan of both the Cowboys and the Buccaneers.
Yeah, it was weird. Once the Cowboys decided that, hey, we can just go up and down the field, everything was working just fine, except, their asshat kicker. That was brutal. And so then there was actually 5 missed extra points in a row, because the Bucs then went ahead on their first touchdown. They missed their extra point too. So no, it was weird to watch Brady. You're right. Just throw and throw and throw and throw and throw. And yeah, okay, he threw 66 times. He had 300 and some odd yards. I didn't even look. I don't care. But it wasn't close. It couldn't have been that close. The game was dominated by the Cowboys, by their defense, and Mike McCarthy did not fuck it up.
Neil, what is it about quarterbacks and their ego that they just think that they need to do everything on their own and completely forget about the running game, as you mentioned? I mean, Tampa wasn't doing a terrible job on the ground, but and maybe I'm alluding to Rodgers as well. Why are they not learning, especially late in their career, to play within their limitations?
I think you have to put this on the coaching staff, though, as well, that the quarterback, by definition, I think to be good at quarterback, you have to have an enormous ego. You have to assume that you're going to succeed every time. And it's the job of the coaching staff to make sure that that does not happen. Brady throwing continuously, sending it down as many times as he did, although many of them very short passes, that is, if that is an available play call for him, he's going to do that. But the coaching staff are the people that have to keep that from happening in the game, that have to make sure that you have more than 12 rushing attempts when your rushing game is actually effective.
or is it one of those situations where you've got Brady and Rodgers, who, you know, with between the coaching staffs or whatever, it's like, well, who runs who here? Versus, you know, you've got the Cincinnati, you've got Joe Burrow, you've got some of these younger quarterbacks who've had success, but that seem to play within the game, within, you know, so they're not bigger than the game. And so maybe that's, I don't know, that's the key, that they're late in their careers and they've, I don't know, earned that right or something. Or is it just that but clearly that doesn't breed success for starters, right?
So a couple other kudos for the game, or things that when I was looking at the game before the game were certainly points of concern, not for me, for many people. This is the first time that Dallas has ever beaten Tom Brady in his long career. So, nice to see Brady go down in a new way. And for Dallas, it was their first road win since the 1992 season, on their first road to the Super Bowl back in that 1990s dynasty. They have had 8 straight road losses since that game. And that was a fun streak to have. And we're going to have to create some new losing streaks for the Cowboys in the future.
Neil, you threw up very profound truth out there, and I will say that the converse is not true. Simply having a big ego does not make you good at playing quarterback. But, the thought there is, these are guys that have been in these positions where, ever since probably Pee Wee ball, they've been carrying their team, right? And that instinct just comes back. We're down. I've got to take care of it. I think the coaching staff, you're right, is a little bit, maybe they're enabling, but, the coaching staff, you're surrounding these players with what they want, what they need for the position that they're in. And I think it's a live by the greatness of a quarterback, die by, the greatness of a quarterback as well. And certainly with Brady, you're seeing that. I think we're seeing that with Rodgers, and it has happened to other quarterbacks as well. But these are our two, recent comparisons that we can make. Dallas, though, 31 points, kind of a weird number with that, because they scored five touchdowns.
Yeah.
Jeff, what happened with that kicker? Is that is that the yips? Is there something going on there?
He had only missed 3 extra points all season up till that point. So no, it was just, some weird anomaly. I think I don't know. The one that went over the goalpost, it got grazed the top of the goalpost. I don't think I've ever seen that happen either. So it was weird. And I was kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? I'm thinking, okay, you miss a couple of these, it usually comes back and bites you in the ass. Maybe it was the opposite. You miss them all, or pretty much all of them. It doesn't matter, because that's how many points you're scoring. Yeah, it was bizarre, but yet by the same token, kind of fulfilling to watch the Cowboys struggle.
You got to credit Mike McCarthy, though, too. And there was a story that went around the local sports radio here too a few years ago. Mason Crosby was having a rough year, and Mike McCarthy, to his credit, kept going back to Crosby because he knew he had faith in his kicker. And I think you saw the same thing there as well. And talking about how our coaching staff surrounds these players, that is something that is needed as well. Okay, yep, you failed. The fact that you missed 4 in a row is unheard of, but that doesn't define who you are as a kicker. 5th touchdown, get out there and get us an extra point. Although he did
I was going to say the 5th touchdown was because they didn't go for the field goal. Yeah. So,
So Dallas with the win, 31-14, they move on to the next round. They're going to be playing on Sunday. They will be traveling over to San Francisco, a classic Cowboys-Niners matchup. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And before we finish up the NFC, let's go over to the AFC, because we have some favored teams there in the AFC because of our 2 most recent trips. The Cincinnati Bengals, boy, get by, by the skin of their teeth, right? And this is a game that probably should not have been as close as it was with the Baltimore Ravens. The game tied at 17, and it looked like the Ravens were ready to score again. And the Bengals get one of the hugest fumble recoveries in probably the history of the game, 98-yard touchdown, go ahead 24-17 and hold on to that win, and they advance on. But the Bengals struggled at home way too much in this game against effectively a third string quarterback. And you got to wonder, is that going to affect them the rest of the way?
Right. I mean, you just look at Tyler Huntley's stats, right? This again, third string quarterback, 17 of 29 for 226 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt. I mean, they allowed him to move the ball down. And yes, not every team has Mark Andrews, but essentially they just needed to move the ball. Tyler Huntley knew what he needed to do as far as getting it to the right people. And I worry about the Bengals a lot. I think the biggest winner of Wild Card Weekend in the AFC was the Kansas City Chiefs, given the struggles of both Buffalo and of Cincinnati.
Well, I think though that for Cincinnati, I'm wondering if it was maybe they were a little overconfident, right? I think they were thinking, okay, we are against a third string quarterback. You know, we should dominate. And I think they maybe got a little unfocused, a little, overconfident, whatever. They needed that huge play to bail their ass out. It happened. It was crazy. Oh my gosh, what a swing. It looked like they were just going to go down and yeah, but so when that did happen, at that point, I think they realized the gravity of it and just then were like, oh my God, it didn't make that much difference on the offensive side. Although at that point they had offensive line injuries. And now we're kind of getting back to the same, okay, deja vu all over again from last year. So how many times is Joe Cool going to get sacked in this next game? I mean, they got to keep him upright. So I think that's the biggest key here is that now they realize, okay, we're past the wild card, but now we've got a problem because our offensive line is back with the injuries to last year at best.
Right. I mean, Joe Burrow was sacked 4 times in that game, and then Mixon only rushed for 39 yards.
Yeah.
That is a sign of an offensive line that is in trouble. And I have grave doubts about this team because of that offensive line.
It's a testament not only to having a good starting offensive line, but having depth in that position.
Yeah.
And I think it was that lack of depth that really affected them more than anything else. But Jeff, I think you're also right that I felt like they were looking past the Ravens. Yeah. And I felt like because of that quarterback issue and probably because of the way that they handled the Ravens just the week prior as well at the end of the regular season, they probably looked past this game. And that's a thing that teams can't do. In the same vein, in the other game, Buffalo, I think, did the same thing. Buffalo probably looked past the Dolphins because they were down to a third string quarterback as well. Interesting thing about it is both of these teams who skated by are going to face each other next week.
Buffalo played that game the way that we've seen a lot of Packers games play out this year. And to be fair, it's been a major concern of Buffalo fans all year. The fact that they cannot put together 4 consecutive quarters of football in a game. They managed to get away with it against Miami, but there are a lot of concerning things for that game if you're a Buffalo fan like we are. So you look at the global picture numbers of the game. Skylar Thompson, Miami's quarterback, 18 of 45, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Miami only had 20 rushes for 42 yards. So they had problems moving the ball by the air. They had problems moving the ball on the ground. Josh Allen, on the other hand, threw for 352 yards. Overall, as far as yardage in the game, Buffalo had 423 to Miami's 231. Buffalo had 25 first downs to Miami's 16. And yet somehow this was a 3-point game. And it was a 3-point game fundamentally because Buffalo played the game in spurts. They roared out to a 17-0 lead. In the first quarter, they beat Miami 14-0. In the second quarter, however, Miami beat them 17-6, although the most important points of that second quarter might have been a drive that Buffalo had right at the end of the first half, in which they drove 54 yards in 33 seconds for a field goal, that field goal ending up being the margin of the game. In the third quarter, Buffalo took advantage, went ahead 14-7 as far as points within that quarter. Miami outscored them in the fourth quarter. And so 2 quarters of football in which Buffalo won, 2 quarters of football in which Buffalo lost. And, you look at Buffalo in the second half, they had 5 punts plus a fumble returned for a touchdown. That is not a formula for winning in the playoffs.
Agreed. And even on TV, the commentators were like, ooh, this crowd is, on edge. And it was. I mean, it was kind of felt bad for the crowd, right? I mean, it was just like, oh shit, here we go again. They managed to win. Like I said, with Cincinnati, same thing. Maybe they were looking past, who knows, with the third string quarterback. I'm pretty sure this week they're not looking past their opponents. I think this is going to be, or I hope, certainly, this is going to be the best weekend of football, most competitive, closest, and probably where these teams, in order to advance, they can't play 2 crappy quarters and 2 good quarters. They need to put together 4 solid, at least way above average, if not perfect quarters. And that's any team not named San Francisco.
And Neil, you nailed it with the points per quarter. I mean, Buffalo opens up this game 17-0 in a game that looks like it's going to be a laugher because Miami is just they're broken. They've got a third string quarterback. They're struggling. They're just happy to be there. And then all of a sudden they start coming back and maybe Buffalo is just resting throughout that. Who knows what's going through their minds, but it just, you've got to keep that foot on the gas and you can't let up, especially in the playoffs. But Buffalo gets the win 34-31. So Buffalo and Cincinnati matching up on Sunday. They're going to be that first game, the early game, 2 Central, 3 o'clock out on the East Coast. So that's an interesting matchup. Then the late game as well. Kind of a weird schedule for the Sunday games, but Buffalo hosting Cincinnati, and I know that's another thing that is a different contention. But the other AFC game that we all got wrong was the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, a game that looked like it should have been a laugh, or a game that was to the point where the Chargers were just dominating this game. Jacksonville comes back and wins 31-30, and we were even commenting Trevor Lawrence was trying, but he put up what we called a Favrean effort of 4 interceptions in that first half, and that's hard to overcome. And we were, I think, kind of looking at it and saying, boy, can he get to 6 interceptions in a playoff game? And how bad is this going to turn out? To Doug Peterson's credit, he turned that team around and he did something to them that got them the win there. And what an amazing comeback that for a season where we've seen amazing comebacks.
Third biggest comeback in playoff history. And it was, I mean, the Chargers were dominant in every phase. Trevor Lawrence looked all the part of the rookie quarterback, right? Starting in his first playoff game. But wow, what a turnaround. I mean, seriously. And it wasn't that he just kept chucking the ball. I mean, a couple of those interceptions early on weren't totally his fault. I mean, there were some bad bounces in there. He wasn't just chucking it up for grabs, but, he just, again, while we kind of back to our earlier point, you got to expect as a quarterback in the NFL that you're going to win the game. And however, the quarterback whisperer, if you will, Doug Peterson, really must have said something, or whatever he said to his team at halftime really friggin' worked, because they came out, they just started methodically chipping away, and to their detriment, or to the Jaguars' credit, LA played right into their hand. They couldn't move the ball. They shut down. They got conservative. The defense went to sleep, and suddenly they lost.
So I think kudos to Doug Peterson. But I'd like to take a broader step back as far as what Doug Peterson has done as a quarterback whisperer in his career. He made Carson Wentz an MVP candidate. Carson Wentz gets injured, and he takes Nick Foles, Big Dick Nick, and makes him a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's got to be ecstatic to be in Jacksonville, to have an actually good quarterback that he can actually coach. And what the Jaguars did, what Doug Peterson did, and how Trevor Lawrence came back in that second half was nothing short of incredible. Just to remind you of how bad Trevor Lawrence was at the beginning, he started out 5 of 18 for 35 yards with 4 interceptions, with just a couple minutes left in the second quarter. Ended up with 4 touchdowns and 288 yards passing. It was a 27-0 game for the Chargers. They lost 31-30. So a 31-3 turnaround as far as the game is concerned. And yes, you've got to give a lot of credit to Doug Peterson. You've got to give a lot of derision to that entire Los Angeles Clippers football team. Every single person on that team failed in the second half of that game. If the offense scores 1 more touchdown, this is not a game. If the defense does anything to stop Jacksonville, this is not a game. If the Asshats manage to have that breakthrough moment, this is not a game. This is a game that should not have been a comeback. It required failures on all elements of the Clippers in order for Jacksonville to win. And again, credit to Jacksonville. Don't get me wrong on that, but there's a lot of blame to go around too.
Well, in that first half as well, Asante Samuel Jr., no matter how the game ended up, he's got his name in the record books with 3 interceptions in a playoff game in the first half. And, the NFL record for any game, regular season or playoffs, is 4 interceptions in a game. That's hard to do. And after 3 in the first half, he had to have been salivating. He had to have been looking at that saying, man, I got to get that 4th one. And the fact that they just didn't even come close in that second half, and that defense, everything about that Chargers team just simply wilted in the second half. And it was truly painful to watch, because I think we felt that before. It's like, oh, why are you doing this? Oh no. And whether it's our team or other teams, it's been a weird season how things like that have been playing out. So Jacksonville gets the win 31-30. They move on. They will travel to Kansas City. Back to the NFC though. The other 2 games we haven't talked about. The first one, Jeff, I don't know why we didn't open with this and just laugh quite a bit, but the Minnesota Vikings go down in defeat at home, hosting Neil is laughing. I love it. Hosting the New York Giants. Final score 31-24. Minnesota I don't think they could get out of their own way and do anything to save this game. It was doomed from the start. Jeff, you're there. How was the weekend in Minnesota?
I think a lot of folks, because of the record, because it was a home playoff game, because Vikings fans are optimistic until they're not. And certainly the worm turned, 11-1 now in 1-score games. There were a number of records in futility set in this game. I mean, the Vikings, it's weird. They didn't play a bad game, but they still lost. The bounces did not go their way, but that the last play of that game, man, that lots of Vikings fans talking about that, like, oh, better luck next year, or oh, it's hopeless. Kirk Cousins sucks. We need a new quarterback, and there was a lot of chatter on this one, but at the end of the day, 4th and 8, you throw a 3-yard out to your tight end. It wasn't the play, obviously, and it wasn't Kirk Cousins' fault necessarily. I mean, maybe on that play, the check down.
The fuck are you talking about? The fuck are you talking about? You throw a ball in which it is no chance of getting a first down. It is absolutely the quarterback's fault. He took the safe pass rather than chucking it. This is where you need to fucking chuck the ball downfield and hope for the best. Ideally chuck it only 10 to 15 yards downfield, but 3 is not doing the job. 3 is not doing the job. You're guaranteed to lose with that mindset. And it's the perfect Kirk Cousins mindset. Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith that played. So there's a statistic that's used as far as do you Alex a play? And that really fundamentally comes down to throwing short of the sticks in a situation where you need a first down. It comes to success rate. That was an Alex Smith play. Alex Smith is a perfect ending for the Vikings season. And it really states what Kirk Cousins is. Going back to the statistics, Cousins, 31 of 39, 273 yards, 7 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no sacks. Everything looks good on paper, but the game is not played on paper. You've got to look at how people are actually playing the game, and you watch how Kirk Cousins played that game, and you knew that he was the inferior quarterback on the inferior team for that game.
No, we didn't rehearse this, so I set him up perfectly, didn't I, John?
Going back to your statistics, though, Neil, talking about your quarterbacks, look at what Daniel Jones did. I mean, he has a career day as well.
Yeah, Danny Dimes, 301 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interception, and then 78 yards rushing on 17 attempts. And then you throw in the magic of having Saquon Barkley on your team, both running the ball and catching the ball. And, Saquon Barkley is sort of what we always imagine Aaron Jones to be doing, and what Aaron Jones obviously does at his best. He is a special weapon, and he's the only reason why I think that the Giants have any sort of a chance this weekend is because, yes, of course, Jones needs to play a great game, but I think Saquon Barkley is going to be the best player on the field as far as the 2 offenses are concerned. And that's the one element that's at least got a chance. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it has a chance of turning the tide in that game.
So the Giants get the victory, not a big road trip for them. They will be heading to Philadelphia. We'll talk about that. And to wrap up the whole weekend of the games, and it was one of the earlier games, and San Francisco kind of handily takes care of the Seattle Seahawks 41-23 in this game. San Francisco looked good in all aspects of the game, and Seattle really just couldn't do much. They were the team that squeaked in. And when we look at it, we talked about laughing at the Vikings. Green Bay is the team that should have been in this spot. I don't know that Green Bay would have fared much better in this game because the 49ers were ready to play. They looked good on that game.
Well, initially it was close. I mean, up till halftime, it was very close. Seattle hung in there. Their offense played well. The defense, it was a very close game. And I'm sitting there thinking, how is this possible? I mean, just there were really no mistakes of note. So it was just like, okay, this is way closer than we're thinking here. And then basically San Francisco's like, all right, fuck it. We're just going to turn it on now and put you out of your misery.
Right. I mean, you look at San Francisco, 505 total yards of offense. Yeah. They've got studs all over the field such that they don't need Brock Purdy to do amazing things. On defense, they sacked Geno Smith 3 times. They had an interception on Smith. They forced a fumble. This is a team that is stacked on both sides of the field. I think they've got the best coach that's remaining in the playoffs. That makes them an extremely dangerous team. And although I still believe that Philadelphia is a better team, I have a lot of faith in the ability of San Francisco when they make it to the NFC Championship game. And it's very much, in my view, a when they make it to the NFC Championship game. One other element for this game, going back to Brock Purdy. So 332 yards of passing, 3 touchdowns, 11.1 yard per attempt as far as Brock Purdy is concerned. This was an amazing quarterback performance, but this is somebody who's still in his rookie year. And among quarterbacks who made the playoffs in their rookie year, there had not been a 200-yard passing game since 1945. There had not been a 2-touchdown game back since 1937. Now, 1937 is the last comparable performance. Hall of Famer Sammy Baugh threw for 337 yards and 3 touchdowns back in 37. But this is a performance that has literally been 3/4 of a century since we've seen something like this for a rookie in the playoffs.
So once again, the Niners, they win the game 41-23. They will be hosting the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to talk about the divisional round, but as we kind of fall on the Seahawks at the end there and we talk about what Green Bay could have done, we kind of harken back to the past here in a classic matchup between the Packers and the Seahawks. And Neil, am I reading this copy correctly? Your Packer player of the past is Brandon Bostic?
So today is the 8th anniversary of the NFC Championship game from the 2014 season, the Packers-Seattle game that we lost in overtime. And so our Packers player of the past is Brandon Bostic. Brandon Bostic being the GOAT as far as that game is concerned. But he took a lot of grief that really covers for grief that should have gone to the Packers offense. And the real GOAT of that game was the Packers offense that failed on so many different occasions. So let's go back to that season. Again, it's an NFC Championship game that is in Seattle. We get the ball first. And on our first drive, we drive all the way down to Seattle's 29. We're in field goal range, and Aaron Rodgers throws an interception. Now, we were saved many times in this game because Seattle could not stop fucking up. And so immediately Seattle gets the ball back and Russell Wilson throws an interception 3 plays later. We get the ball at Seattle's 19-yard line to start our second drive. We get all the way down to the 1-yard line on second down, get a 0-yard run on second, 0-yard run on third, kick a field goal from the 1-yard line on 4th and 1. But we're ahead 3-0. We draw first blood. Seattle gets the ball back. They fumble it on the kickoff. We get the ball at Seattle's 23 for our third drive. In 6 plays, we get down to the 1-yard line. We had 1st and goal on the 7. We ended up with 4th and goal on the 1. 2nd, 4th and goal, another Mason Crosby 18-yard field goal. Seattle gets the ball back. They go 3 and out. We get the ball. We finally do something. We have a touchdown drive, pass from Rodgers to Cobb. Seattle gets the ball back. They go 3 and out. We get the ball at Seattle's 33 on the next drive. And in 6 plays, we only go 11 yards. This time we again go to 4th and 1, but at least we only made it to Seattle's 23-yard line and kick a field goal. So now we've had the ball in field goal range 5 times, and we have a 16-0 lead. Of course, 16-0 is a lot better than all of the other opportunities. We've had 3 4th and 1 so far in the game. Seattle gets the ball back. They throw an interception on the first play for Russell Wilson. We get the ball back, and we throw an interception on the 3rd play of the drive. Seattle gets the ball back. Russell Wilson throws an interception at the end of a long drive. We get the ball back and punt. So we're now at halftime, and we still have a 16-0 lead, but we have absolutely squandered a series of opportunities within that game. And just to emphasize how badly we squandered the situation. So first drive, we got into field goal range. On the Packers' second through sixth drives in that game, our average starting field position was the Seattle 37-yard line. 5 drives, average starting field position, Seattle's 37, 3 field goals, 1 touchdown, 1 interception for those drives. And the problem with that is it only got worse from there as far as our offense, and Russell Wilson stopped failing as far as the game was concerned. So our next 7 drives, the 7th to the 13th drives of the game, we had a 4-play drive with a punt, a 3-and-out, 4 plays and a punt. We got a 57-yard drive for a field goal, a 3-and-out, and a 3-and-out. And so we are in a situation where we had 5 drives that made it a grand total of 30 yards from the end of the second quarter into the fourth quarter of the game. And unfortunately, we allowed Seattle to get back into the game during that time period, partly because of our assets. John Ryan somehow ends up being a first touchdown, throwing the first touchdown pass for Seattle. So asshats getting involved there. We had all of the opportunities in the world. Seattle gave us an interception into the fourth quarter. And again, we just had these continuing 3-and-outs. And the real element of the game of concern is when Seattle finally had their first real long touchdown drive that brought the game to 19-14. It was 3:52 left in the game when that drive started. In the Packers' previous drive, the Packers had forced Seattle to use some of their timeouts. So Seattle now has to go for an onside kick.
So this is just a feel-good story. This
To coin a phrase, Neil, it just gets worse, doesn't it?
but wait, there's more. Onside kicks aren't usually very successful, right? I mean, it's just they're just not. You've got the hands team, you've got experienced players, you've got everybody knows what's going to happen, right? Everybody's prepared. Then there's our friend Brandon.
He's supposed to be blocking. And as you can see in the picture, he is not blocking, most decidedly. And Jordy Nelson, who is saying, oh, I'm going to get this ball, I'm going to fall on it, and this is going to be sweet, has the proverbial oh shit look on his face.
Because the guy that's supposed to be blocking
he sees a giant man jumping in the air, blotting out the sun.
Exactly.
Going for the football.
Going for the football is an accurate phrase here.
Yeah.
And because that's, in fact, all he did. He went for it. It touched his person and then kept moving on.
I hate to kick a guy when he was down, and I don't think anyone felt worse about this play than Brandon Bostic. And it is just one of those moments in Packer lore that it is our moment and we have to live with it. And that ball was fumbled away, as was the remainder of that football game.
But we were still ahead at that point. We were ahead 19-14. Seattle in 4 plays, went 50 yards. They got the touchdown and they got the 2-point conversion. That meant that they were ahead 22-19. The Packers now get the ball. They had a 44-second drive as far as that, getting that touchdown is concerned. So the Packers get the ball with a little over a minute left. And we had arguably our best drive of the game, in which Aaron Rodgers took the team down the field, 7 plays, 48 yards, a little over a minute of time. We kicked the field goal, or Mason Crosby kicks the field goal, in order to make it a tie game at 22-22. Aaron Rodgers on that drive, 3 of 5, 36 yards, and a 12-yard rush. So 48 yards of offense from Aaron Rodgers in the passing game in that drive. Unfortunately, that was our last drive of the game because Seattle got the kickoff. Seattle got the coin toss in overtime. They had an 87-yard, 6-play drive, scored the touchdown. The game is over. We lost 28-22. But
where was Matt Hasselbeck to say we're going to take the ball and we're going to win the game?
We're going to take the ball and we're going to score. But Brandon Bostic is my Packers player of the past, not because I want to pile on, but because of the magnitude of this game. And he's been the fall guy for this game when the offense should have been the ones who took all of the blame, and the coaching staff should have taken the blame for the game. So if we look at just a couple of statistics in the game, other than on that last drive where Aaron Rodgers got the game tying field goal, Aaron Rodgers was 16 of 29 for 133 yards and 2 interceptions. Okay, so 133 yards of offense, 4.2 yards per attempt for the passing game. Now, I mentioned the fourth downs that we had. We had 4 4th and 1s in that game. The 4th and 1 that was the furthest away from the Seattle goal line was at midfield. That was in the second half. But we had essentially 4 perfect situations for going for it on 4th and 1. We took advantage of none of those situations. And in the second half, as I said, our offense did absolutely nothing on the drives that they had. We had 5 drives with a total of 30 yards. It was a failure as far as all elements of the game. Of course, we allowed Marshawn Lynch to get 157 yards rushing. We allowed those drives at the end, but this is a game that should not have been close. It should not have depended on an error by the Assets. It should not have depended on Brandon Bostic. It should have been put away by the offense long ago. Just a reminder, Russell Wilson had 4 interceptions and there was a fumble in that game. Seattle had 5 turnovers. We should have been able to put that game away since it had nothing to do with a third string tight end who is playing special teams.
In addition to that, the one that I remember being just kind of what the hell is going on moment is the 2-point conversion, right? I mean, that was absolutely inexplicable because everybody knew it was coming, right? And it was just, and they got it. And it was such in such a bizarre fashion. It was like the defense almost like gave it to them, except no, you don't give it to them in this case. You don't want them to go up by 3. And it did. And it was just, you're right. It was like the Twilight Zone. It just got weirder and weirder because this was I think Russell Wilson's 4th interception where he just sat down. He didn't try. You didn't want to fumble. Okay, I get it. But there was no return with 2.5 minutes left or so. It was just like, oh my God, just run, do something. Don't fumble, but they tried so desperately not to lose as we talked about earlier in this game. Winning teams, successful winning teams, keep their foot on the gas or whatever you want to say. They don't let up. They don't play just to get to the win. They play with purpose. They play with drive. They play with intensity. And we did not see that a lot in this game, unfortunately. And, the team, perhaps not the better team, won here, but, they went on to the Super Bowl, obviously, which was crushing, but it was weird. And again, Packer lore, it's something we remember fondly because we watched it.
Well, remember fondly, I think is the correct word if we're really into
punching ourselves in the nuts.
Self-nut punching. Yeah. But it's certainly part of the
yes.
The beef Swellington is very much a part of our lore. I want to go back to Brandon Bostic though, because it's actually remarkable that he made it to the NFL and played in this game. So he's originally from Florence, South Carolina. And he went to Newberry College, and I have no idea where Newberry College was until I looked at this. It is in the South Atlantic Conference in Division II, and I never knew there was a South Atlantic Conference in Division II. In college, he had 136 receptions with 19 touchdowns. He was an undrafted free agent for the Packers in 2012. 6'3", 250 pounds. He ran a 4.59.40, so a fast man for somebody of that size. 19 reps. 2012, he was on the practice squad exclusively. 2013, he started playing special teams. He got his first touchdown from Scott Tolzien on November 10th, 2013. It was also Scott Tolzien's first touchdown. He finished that 2013 year with 7 receptions, 120 yards, and a touchdown. In 2014, he had 2 receptions for 3 yards and a touchdown. Ironically, that touchdown was on a pass from Aaron Rodgers against the Bears on a 4th and 1. That is the sum of his time with the Packers that we don't remember as well, but it is remarkable that he actually even made it to that Packers team, given his Division II background, given his undrafted free agent status. And he did get cut, obviously, after the playoffs were concerned. He was first picked up by Minnesota because, of course, Minnesota is going to pick up a Green Bay player if they have
Cast
the
off.
opportunity. They'll choose whatever Green Bay players they can because it thinks it makes them better. He did not end up playing for either Minnesota or for Arizona, with whom he also had been on the team. But in 2016, he did play for the Jets. He actually started 7 games, 8 receptions, 63 yards. So a career with 17 receptions, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns. And nobody remembers any of that because of this one play. But this Packers game should not have been remembered for a error on a onside kick recovery. It should have been remembered for all of the errors we made up until that point in that game that even allowed an onside kick to come into play.
The biggest lesson of that game, Neil, not only being able to put 4 quarters of football together, but also playing through the end of the game. I think that's something that the Jacksonville Jaguars learned most definitely this past weekend. We'll talk about how that can help them out here as we're going to look at our divisional round and the first game coming up on Saturday at 3:30 Central Time, Neil. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the number 4 seed, head over to Kansas City. Jaguars at Chiefs. And I think if we are sticking in with our original picks, or go ahead and change your picks, whatever you want to do. Neil, what do you like in this matchup?
So first of all, what I like is now we only have good teams. We've gotten rid of all of those crappy teams, all the teams that never should have been in the playoffs in the first place. Now we've got good teams. Unfortunately, this is our last weekend of football with 4 games until September of this year. But let's enjoy those 4 games of the divisional round. So first of all, Jags against Kansas City. I love what Trevor Lawrence did. I love what Doug Peterson did. Unfortunately, I just think Kansas City is a much better team. Specifically, DVOA, the Jags are only 13th. Their defense is 26th. The only hope that they have is Kansas City's defense is dicey as well, but Kansas City has the best offense. So we're in these Saturday games, as far as I'm concerned, we're in the realm of everything being involved, hopes and prayers. And I think the hopes and prayers from the Jacksonville side is that Trevor Lawrence finds a rabbit in a hat again, and that we get Andy Reid in the playoffs again, as we have seen many times. I think it always can come back at any time. This can be true, and therefore that is what they're hoping. But Patrick Mahomes, I think, is still Patrick Mahomes. I think Kansas City wins the game easily.
Agreed.
You know, you look at the whole picture, Neil, there are only 7 meaningful games left in this NFL season, and you just are going to have to sit down at the table and chew every single morsel that you can get in this Chiefs-Jaguars game. I'm going to stick with my Kansas City prediction to advance on in this one, the number 1 seed on the season, and truly a dominant team once again in the AFC. The nightcap on Saturday, the other number 1 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles, hosting the New York Giants. One of those teams really fraudulently, Neil, maybe these aren't all the best teams. Maybe one of those teams still shouldn't be there, but they are there. They made their way through. What do you like, Giants, Eagles?
The Giants are good enough to beat Kirk Cousins. I don't think they're good enough to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. And let's just look right at that DVOA number for the Giants. They're 21st in the NFL after beating the Vikings. Philadelphia's 3rd. Offense, defense, special teams. Philadelphia is better in all 3 phases. They've got incredible skill players. It's going to take Jalen Hurts sort of stumbling and another incredible game for Danny Dimes for the Giants to have a chance. I think the Eagles win this one.
I agree with Neil. I think Hurts, if Hurts does, though, have an off game, I think it opens the door for the Giants because, Daniel Jones could outplay Hurts in terms of not only, passing, but also using his legs as he did against the Vikings. But I think the Philadelphia defense is better, and I think that they will find a way to win.
This is the one pick I have to revise from my original prediction, so I will take Philadelphia here. They are the number 1 seed. I think they've proven themselves to be the best team in the NFC this season, and they will advance on as well. Taking a look at Sunday, it's the 2 teams we really like, and this is one that, then when it depends on who wins this game, how that Kansas City matchup is going to go, where that game is going to be played. So we have the Bengals and the Bills, a game that didn't get played a couple of weeks ago that really would have decided a lot of things. I think there's going to be a lot of hype on that one, but it is the 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, first game of the day on Sunday. The Cincinnati Bengals traveling over to Buffalo. Neil, what do you like?
Both teams are great. I mean, I think this is the thing. Both teams have flaws, certainly, but both teams have the chance to win the Super Bowl. And this is something I don't think we can say about any of the games on Saturday. Sunday, we've got actually good teams in both games on both sides of the field. So let's just look at basic numbers. Bills are number 1 in DVOA. The Bengals are 5th. Offense, they're 2nd and 4th. Defense, 4th and 11th. The only difference by DVOA is special teams. The Bills are number 1 in special teams in the NFL by DVOA. But of course, we know that these teams have problems playing consistently, as we saw in the wild card round. And to me, the stats that matter and what's going to determine the outcome of the game looks at what the line is going to do on the offense and on the defensive side. The Bengals were sacked 4 times in their wild card game. Josh Allen was sacked 7 times in the wild card game. If Josh Allen is sacked more than Joe Burrow, I think Joe Burrow and the Bengals are going to win. I am sticking with the Bills as the better team. I think they are the better team. I think home field makes it an advantage. I just think that they need to do more correct than they did in the wild card round. They've got to go beyond 2 quarters of football. They've got to go to 3 or 4 quarters of football, or Cincinnati's going to be able to take them out.
I agree. And as I mentioned too, with the Cincinnati offensive line, I think I think the Bills are going to tee off on Joe Burrow. I think it's going to be last year all over again. And I think the Bills hopefully, have learned from their mistakes, what they can do, as Neil said, put together at least 3 really good quarters. This one probably is going to come down to something weird, right? It's going to be some weird turnover. It's going to be a weird bounce. It's going to be a pick 6 or scoop and score or something like that. And for the Bills fans, Bills Mafia, I hope it doesn't go against them. Again, being at home, I think is somewhat an advantage just for the crowd noise, but in terms of the elements or things like that, both teams are used to playing outside. So I think it's going to come down to something really weird and quirky. And Joe Burrow being able to stay upright in the pocket. Otherwise, I think, I'd be shocked if the Bills gave up 7 sacks again. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think they're going to be really focused. I think that there's a sentiment, to get the Bills to the Super Bowl on a number of levels here again. So I'm sticking with the Bills as well.
All right. And I will say that with Cincinnati, I am concerned with the offensive line, how that is going to hold up for them. But just because I don't want to have to make a lot of marks on my piece of paper, I'm going to stick with what I put down. I'm going to go with a big hooday, and I will take the Bengals this weekend. All right. The 4th game, the late game on Sunday, the Dallas Cowboys now travel to the San Francisco 49ers. This is the 90s all over again, a classic Cowboys 49ers matchup. How's it going to turn out, Neil?
So which team is Deion Sanders playing for? That's the team that's going to win.
Right.
Yeah.
Seriously. I mean, it's Aikman and Young versus Young all over again. And I hate to say this, but it's actually good to see both of these teams good again. I think it makes football better when these great franchises are both playing at the top of their game. Both teams are good, and I'm really looking forward to this game as well. San Francisco overall 2nd DVOA, Dallas is 6th. Most importantly, as far as looking at what they're best at, we know that they're both strong defenses. And indeed, this is the number 1 defense versus the number 2 defense in the NFL by DVOA. But both teams have the offensive guns in order to perform as well. I'm looking forward to Dak Prescott. Is he going to be able to replicate some of the things that he did in that last game? Is he going to be able to show that poise, show that ability to move the ball down, show something that grows beyond some of the things he'd done after being injured in the regular season? Is Brock Purdy going to be able to be rattled? Can the Dallas defense force Brock Purdy to make the rookie mistakes? Because again, we're in a situation where there's never been a rookie quarterback that has made the Super Bowl. And the Dallas defense certainly is the one element that I think has a chance to speak as far as this is concerned. I think that they do have that ability, but on the other hand, there's so many weapons for that San Francisco team. It's going to be really tough because they can just send the ball wherever. I'm really excited for this game. I think it's going to be a good game. And I have to make an admission to you fellows. I'm actually cheering for Dallas in this game.
Oh my.
And
What?
And it's not because of a love of Mike McCarthy or anything like that. I'm doing it as,
we know that.
I'm doing it for purely selfish Packers fans reason. What is the thing that causes Aaron Rodgers to play at his very best? It's when Aaron Rodgers plays with a chip on his shoulder. You get a 1st round draft pick, and he's got to say, well, I've got to play at an MVP level. You got to reach the level of where the chip is. He replaces Brett Favre. Well, he's got to win a Super Bowl, but he sort of got to that point and he needed to find new slights. Well, I can't think of a bigger slight for Aaron Rodgers to chew on than Mike McCarthy winning a Super Bowl without him. I don't absolutely want the Dallas Cowboys to win a Super Bowl, but I think for Packers fans, that is the best thing possible to give us the best chance of winning a Super Bowl next year and getting the best out of Aaron Rodgers. So go Cowboys.
What a take. All right. Well, I'm going to stick with my pick from last week. I think the winner of this game is going to the Super Bowl for the NFC. I think these are by far the two best teams. The 49, it just makes me throw up in my mouth when I see Jerry Jones trying to high five, I'm like, no, don't show that. Just no, that's not. So Jerry no, I would like to see him not win this game. Neil, I really appreciate, and I agree with you for those reasons to get a chip on Rodgers' shoulder, to have him back one more season and go, well, fuck Mike McCarthy, right? If he's going to win a Super Bowl without me, I'm going to win one without him. But I just think that Mike McCarthy's going to do Mike McCarthy things in this game, and which is you don't want, if in that case. But I just think San Francisco, like I said, both sides of the ball, there's really the only weakness is the rookie quarterback, who has shown no weakness. So based on that, I think it's going to be San Francisco. And like I said, and I think they're going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl.
I should follow up, but I actually think that San Francisco is going to win too. And honestly, they have been the single most consistent team in the NFL at the end of the season. I think that they are currently the best team that's out there right now. And so, although I badly want the Cowboys to win this game, I want Mike McCarthy to go to the Super Bowl at the very least. I think that San Francisco is the better team and is going to win it.
Okay, so you're riding the fence, but you're taking San Francisco as your pick.
Heart and mind, right? My brain says what the real analysis is. And yes, Mike McCarthy is still on that Dallas Cowboys sideline. But, wouldn't it be a ride as far as the Packers are concerned to have Aaron Rodgers just desperate to get a second Super Bowl?
And I'll stick with my pick of San Francisco here. The defense really is, take your numbers, Neil, but it's the eye test. That defense is really strong. They do have the offensive weapons, and you've got the story made for Hollywood, where one handsome quarterback is replaced by an equally handsome quarterback, and it'll be a fun story for them to make a movie out of when this one is all said and done. So those are our picks for the divisional round. We'll come back next week and see how we did. And we've got those picks down for the historical records so that we can look back on them and laugh at ourselves if we need to. But historical records are always a good thing. And there are lots of things we can learn from history. There's ups, there's downs, and there's a lot of good and bad. And Jeff's got a little bit of it for us.
Everyone.
And Jeff's got a little bit of it for us in his bedtime story. Jeff?
I do. So 'tis the season for teams that don't make the playoffs. Oftentimes they fire their head coaches. So first and foremost, I wanted to look back and say, okay, I didn't know off the top of my head how many coaches there have been in the history of the Packers. That number is 15, including Matt LaFleur. So we're on our 15th head coach in over 100 years. So that's not too bad. So we've had 15, with those 15 head coaches, 4 of the 15 have coached 9 or more years. And 2 of those 15 have coached each coached 1 year. Any guesses, gentlemen, on I know you know one of them, but
Peter McLean is one.
Ray Rhodes is the other.
So there's if you're named Ray and you were a Packer coach, you only coached a year. So you had Ray Scooter McLean, who coached 1 year, and Ray Rhodes, of course, in 1999, who coached 1 year. Then I started doing a little more research, and so there were 3 interim coaches in there as well, and actually Ray Scooter McLean was an interim coach as well. But I'm going to take us back to 1950. Curly Lambeau gives his resignation. So the only coach the Packers have had since 1921. So 29 years with the Packers, there's a falling out. So he submits his resignation, and there was a new coach within a week. This was in January of 1950. The replacement was Gene Ronzani. Now, Gene was an interesting character. So there's a picture of him here. So Gene was completely affiliated with another organization in the NFL at that time, the Chicago Bears. So he played 8 seasons for the Bears as a halfback and quarterback, and he worked as a Bears assistant under George Halas. He had only 2 years head coaching experience, and that was at the minor league level with the Akron Bears and the Newark Bears. So Ronzani he was introduced as the second coach of the Green Bay Packers on February 6th, 1950. It took him 5 months to complete his coaching staff, 4 coaches. And most of them had Chicago Bears ties as well. The Packer fans, they kind of were skeptical of this guy because they knew his background, they knew his history. The Bears were hated rivals. And here's this guy who comes on as the coach after Curly Lambeau, right? His coaching tenure in Green Bay was not successful. So in just under 4 seasons, he had a record of 14-31-1, which is a whopping .315 winning percentage, or lack thereof, if you will. So for all of the bad in that, there was some interesting kind of anecdotes or footnotes to this that made Gene kind of an interesting character, not only in Packer history, but also in NFL history. Of considerable note, he did hire a 23-year-old kid named Jack Venezzi. And we've talked about him a little bit before. We may dedicate a whole episode to Jack because he really was an amazing scout for the Packers. He unfortunately died young, but he was an amazing front office person. Gene hired him in September of 1950, and that turned out to be very well in Packers history. A couple other things, though. So even though Gene didn't really have that much experience as a head coach, he was willing to experiment, almost mad scientist-wise, with the offense. He's credited in many circles with originating the spread formation. So the trips formation, this is back when you'd line up the quarterback and there'd be 3 running backs behind him, the T formation. And he said, you know what, let's not do that. And he put 3 wide receivers out to the side. This was groundbreaking. Nobody did this. In addition to that, he was one of the first, if not the first, to run a T formation, and he utilized the shotgun to run his base offense. It was like, okay. So unfortunately, through the years, through the losing, in his last year, the Packers languished to a 2-6-1 record in 1953, and he was fired, as some other coaches, it happens, with 2 games remaining in the season. Now, this is where things get a little weird. To replace Gene, not 1, not 2, but 3 assistant coaches who were on the staff were hired to coach the remaining 2 games. Hugh DeVore, Chuck DeVries, and Ray Scooter McLean. Now, Ray came back and did actually coach in 1958, and one of the coaches, Chuck DeVries, he was fired actually before the next game. So he didn't end up coaching any of the games. And the other 2 gentlemen went 0-2. So throughout the 50s, then Lyle Blackburn was hired. Then Ray Scooter McLean made another appearance. And that pretty much closed out the 50s until Vince Lombardi showed up in 1959. Unfortunately, got back in track, and there were no longer this massive turnover of coaches and assistant coaches. And what it really boils down to is coaching consistency and success within an organization.
So it's interesting, though, right? That period of Gene Ronzani also included the season from Billy Houghton that we've talked about previously this year. And you talked about innovations in the passing game. Well, something in the passing game that leads a Wookiee wide receiver to end up with 13 touchdowns in a 12-game season does say something about the mindset. But there may certainly have been a Peter principle involved in that he may have been better suited to be a coordinator than a head coach.
I think that's an accurate statement. Yeah, he apparently was a player's coach. And back then, players' coaches weren't particularly successful, and even today, they're not always successful. But it was a strange situation. But yeah, he was an interesting guy around Green Bay. There's lots of interesting stories about him. I won't get into his biography and some of the other sordid tales. But there was certainly some interesting things, and he did set up the organization with Jack Venisi and the subsequent drafts throughout the 50s to set the Packers up for success in the 60s.
There was no lack of talent on those teams in the 50s either, especially from when they're drafted, when they're young players. But yeah, you said that it's something about, I guess, the personality of that coach. And we talked about Scooter McLean as well, being a player's coach. And in that era, what that meant is you played poker with your players and you chased the girlies around town with your players. And, you're kind of big man on campus and nothing else really mattered. And it showed just in the way that these teams played. And that's why they didn't make postseason play. And teams that don't make the postseason make changes at coaches, and that's what we had a lot of after Curly Lambeau left. And that's all we've got for this week. It is an interesting weekend. Like we said, 4 games this weekend and then only 3 more after that. So sit down and enjoy your smorgasbord of games this weekend. You guys, what do you have to look forward to this weekend? Any final thoughts?
My final thoughts is that my favorite game of last weekend was the North London Derby. What do you think of Tottenham shit? What do you think of shit Tottenham? Arsenal with a glorious 2-0 victory at the shithole. We talked about Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and how the stink of that stadium touched the Giants, the Packers, and the Vikings this year. It's the first time that Arsenal has won in that stadium since it was built. And Arsenal is now sitting on top of the Premier League with an 8-point lead. And we play Manchester United this weekend. So go Arsenal.
I don't know how to follow that. So I'm looking forward to some quality football. Like I said, our games are waning. So we've got 4 for this weekend. So looking forward to that. And hopefully we'll see we'll chat about our picks and we'll see what weirdness occurs this weekend. Cause it seems like at least one game per weekend seems to come up. There's something that we've either never seen before or something that makes us go, wow. So we'll see if we get that this weekend.
Well, I'm looking forward to trying to get a guest for us for next week's show. And I think the winner of the Buffalo-Cincinnati game will help decide which road I go down to get us someone to talk about the championship games in the following week. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens. All right, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe, leave a comment for us, let us know how we're doing. You can also find the GBC podcast at Green Bay Chat. That's all one word, Green Bay Chat. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. Facebook, it's the GBC Podcast, Green Bay Chat, and on Spotify. Just get the audio there, search Green Bay Chat. We make it easy for you. As always, may you fully appreciate the magnitude of your impending good fortune. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.
Good night.